Hi, Bob Mack from World Class Beverages here to talk a little bit about India Pale Ales, or IPAs, one of my favorite beer styles. There are some great stories about the origin and development and history of the India Pale Ale. It's a tremendous beer that has roots in England, but it's also become an extremely popular beer style in the United States, and it is growing in other countries around the world. We're going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of IPAs, and we're going to talk about the origins and history of the IPA, which can sometimes be a controversial topic. IPAs are one of the most popular styles of beer in America today. Among American craft brewers, it is almost essential to brew at least one type of IPA, and some brewers produce two or more versions of it. IPA is an abbreviation for India Pale Ale. It was brewed at first as an export product primarily, though it eventually became popular with the local English citizenry. The IPA is essentially a stronger, hoppier version of a pale ale in either its English or American versions. But the differences between pale ales and IPAs are notable enough that the IPA deserves its own style category. The IPA originally became popular in England as an export product that did well on the long sea voyage to India. Its alcohol content and high hopping rates made it ideal for export. Several different variations of IPAs are recognized, including the English, American, and Imperial versions, while other variants are starting to gain in popularity and acceptance. In the middle of the 18th century, around 1750, pale ales were popular in England, particularly as recent manufacturing advances allowed for a much lighter colored beer. Coke-fired mold ovens left less smoke and contaminants, resulting in a paler color. This pale color provided the pale ale with a very distinct attraction for consumers who were used to nothing but dark-colored beers. At the Bow Brewery in the mid-18th century, George Hodgson was brewing a pale ale called October Beer. Hodgson's October Beer was slightly higher in alcohol content than most pale ales of the time, and it had a larger amount of hops in it than most beers of the time. Both the higher alcohol content and the high hopping rate would contribute to the longevity of the beer. In fact, it was common for October beer to age for as much as 2 years before it would be consumed at all. But Hodgson probably didn't brew October beer to last a long time. He was just brewing a beer style that was already popular with English drinkers. The painting at the bottom of this slide is actually a depiction of the Bow Brewery. The Bow Brewery was located in Bow, not far east of downtown London and near the Lee River, a tributary of the Thames. The Bow Brewery and the docks of the East India Company were within a few kilometers of each other, so it was very easy for Hodgson to sell beer to ships heading overseas. In fact, Bow Brewing sold many different styles of beer to them for overseas shipment, and eventually Hodgson's October Beer was among them. To the delight of the East India Company, Hodgson's October Beer survived the trip to India with ease, faring better than many other styles of beer. The stronger, hoppier beer style became a popular export product, and the Bow Brewery dominated the beer trade to India for many years. Eventually, other brewers began brewing it or versions of it specifically for export, and it also became popular with the local population. This leads many people to refer to the IPA as the first export beer. By the early 1800s, other British brewers were starting to take an interest in the business that Hodgson had established with his trade to India. In particular, Burton-upon-Trent brewer Samuel Alsop's business was ailing in 1822 due to a loss of export sales to Russia, and he was persuaded to replace his lost business by making his own version of Hodgson's export beer. Brewers in Burton had a distinct advantage over London brewers that they were unaware of at the time. The water in and around Burton is very rich in the mineral calcium sulfate. Calcium sulfate naturally produces a much better pale ale than London water, so once Burton brewers began to brew IPAs, they slowly began to gain much of the existing IPA business due to their superior product. It wasn't until some years later that London brewers learned to treat their water by adding calcium sulfate in order to compete with the Burton beers. It's impossible to read here, but this is the same Liverpool Mercury newspaper article from January 30th, 1835 that mentions Hodgson and Company's East India Pale Ale. You can just make it out in the right-hand column. A lot of mythology and controversy has grown up over the centuries surrounding the development of the IPA and some of the stories that are commonly told and retold about their development. I'd like to address a few of those points here, commonly accepted and held beliefs that are certainly under a lot of scrutiny and generate a lot of controversy. First, it's very commonly said or mentioned that other beers didn't survive the trip to India, and hence IPAs were developed for that reason. In fact, porters that were popular in England long before pale ales did rather well on the long trip, as did other beer styles. Some beers, however, did not always manage the variations in temperature so well, and beer quality in general did suffer. During this time, the British Admiralty was publicly encouraging brewers to brew stronger, more highly hopped beers because they knew that they would survive the voyage to India in much better shape than lesser beers. George Hodgson did not necessarily develop the IPA style specifically for the sea voyage to India, as is commonly mentioned also. There were other brewers making beers with similar recipes. Hodgson was also making October beer for sale locally. Selling October beer to the East India Company was not his original purpose, in fact, for that beer. Hodgson was somewhat fortunate that the characteristics of his October beer made it almost ideal for shipment to India. In the end, did George Hodgson really invent the IPA? To some extent, Hodgson was at the right place at the right time. His proximity to the East India Company docks and his success with the popular October beer set him up for success. However, it should certainly be argued that history is full of such circumstances leading to the discovery of or even the invention of many things. But it might be more accurate to say that Hodgson popularized the IPA rather than invented it. In any case, stories have grown up and changed over the years, leading to a significant amount of controversy in the understanding of the IPA and its origins. I'd like to talk now a little bit about the different types of IPAs and the different characteristics that distinguish them from each other. There are basically three types of India Pale Ales, with each one being quite distinct on its own. And there are also a couple of important variations on this beer style that are growing in popularity in recent years. The English invented the IPA, so the English IPA should be pretty close to the original version from the mid-18th century, right? Well, perhaps not. There's no absolute way to know what those beers in the 18th century tasted like. There are surviving recipes, but over the centuries, many of the ingredients themselves have evolved as well as the brewing techniques. So an English IPA today may or may not be entirely like those in the year 1770. We're just not sure. Having said that, the English IPA is likely as close to the original IPA as we can get. At least the basic ingredients are the same. English IPAs contain English hops. This gives them a character that is specific to those hop flavors and aromas. English hops are bitter and often taste floral, earthy, spicy, or somewhat grassy. The bready or biscuit-like qualities of the English malts are characteristic of English pale ales, and that carries over into English IPAs. Toffee and caramel malt flavors are also common in this version. English IPAs are typically 5% or more in alcohol by volume. There are a handful of beers in England that call themselves IPAs, but which weigh in at far less than 5% ABV. Those beers are more representative of an English pale ale or bitter than they are of an English IPA, so the names can be misleading. American IPAs are certainly the American version of the English style, but there are a number of differences. In particular, the use of American hops sets American IPAs apart from their British counterparts. American hops can be quite different in flavor and aroma than English hops. While both hops can be very floral in nature, American hops often taste or smell of citrus, pine, resin, or even fruit. Grapefruit and orange, for example, are common adjectives used to describe the aroma and flavor of some American hops. American hops are usually distinctive enough that it is easy to tell an American IPA from an English IPA just by the aroma. A strong scent of pine, fruit, or citrus is a giveaway for an American IPA. In essence, the American IPA is a stronger, hoppier version of the American Pale Ale. The Imperial IPA is a stronger, hoppier version of either the English or American IPA. Put in more hops and brew it to a higher alcohol level, and you've got an Imperial version of either of the two. Imperial IPAs boast extreme hop aromas, hop flavors, and high alcohol contents. Many different adjectives can be used to describe an Imperial IPA. The word double is used commonly, and sometimes words like extreme, extra, or even triple are used in its place. Some people believe that today's Imperial IPA is very close to the type of beer that the original English IPA was. It's possible that this is true, but even with a starting alcohol level of 7.5%, Imperial IPAs are probably a little bit stronger than most IPAs of the 18th century. The English, American, and Imperial IPA are three pretty much universally recognized variations of the IPA style. But there are two other IPA variants worth mentioning here that are not always recognized as official beer styles, but which are gaining in popularity in recent years. The first of those is the Black IPA, also known as a Cascadian Dark Ale. This beer, named for the Cascade region of the Pacific Northwest, features a strong American hop character accompanied by a distinct roasted malt content. The addition of dark roasted malts gives these beers a dark color as well as a distinct flavor, and some might classify them as an American stout when they're dark enough. Another relatively new variant is the Belgian-style IPA. In recent years, brewers on both sides of the Atlantic have experimented with this style. Belgian brewers have experimented with American hops in their beers, most often in Belgian triples, while American brewers have experimented with Belgian yeast strains in their IPAs. The result is often a very dry beer that acquires a lively fruit character from the Belgian yeast. Well, it's no secret at this point, but the key to all IPAs are hops. Hops appear in almost every beer, but no single beer style features hops as a flavor and aroma to the level that IPAs do. Bitter hop flavors are a result of alpha acids. Alpha acids are contained in all hops and can typically be anywhere from 5% to 20% of the content of a hop flower, with American hops typically being among the higher alpha acid percentage hops. Beta acids are also present in hops, and while they are very similar to alpha acids, they do not contribute significantly to the flavor of the beer. They do, however, create a lot of aroma in beers that contain high beta acid hops. The American Cascade hop, for example, typically contains slightly more beta acid than alpha acid, and so it is commonly used in American IPAs for its aroma properties rather than for its flavor properties. I want to thank you for spending some time with us learning and talking about India Pale Ales today. It's certainly one of my favorite beer styles, and I have a lot of fun actually researching this particular presentation on the web. You'll find a number of great resources out there. I'm listing a few here for your perusal that I found to be extremely interesting. Breweryhistory.com, beerchurch.com, and beerconnoisseur.com all had excellent articles on the history and development of IPAs. If you do some Google searching, you'll also find some interesting blog posts about the controversy surrounding George Hodgson and the invention of India Pale Ales. The Hop Union website also has a terrific bit of information on hops, alpha acid, beta acid, and the various types of hop varieties that are available today. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking to you soon about another beer style.